Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and start live writing the motives for colonization DBQ that you were given. I'm going to do that right here. Before I do that, I wanted to provide you with a sneak preview into the Golden Ticket. The Golden Ticket is a resource that I developed that has key content and is kind of almost like something that you can use during the test. It's not very comprehensive, but it is 5 pages. You can use it on the test. I recommend that you print it out. If you can't print it out, I recommend that you write sections of it. That is going to be a grade for next week. We'll talk about stuff. We're going to do some stuff with that Golden Ticket next week as well. And hopefully it can become a tool that you can use to become a better writer and to do well on the AP test. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll show you the Golden Ticket, so maybe you'll get a better idea of what I mean by that. And then I'll start writing the DBQ that you have due on Friday. This is the DBQ you have due on Friday, Motives for Colonization. It's something that I've written before. And I will also be finishing this Golden Ticket. So Michael Scott, I love this episode of The Office. If you haven't seen it, it's so funny. It's where he puts like a golden ticket in just watch it. It's really funny. So your Golden Ticket, it's going to be something that I recommend that you print out. If you don't have a printer, I know a lot of us don't have access to printers. I don't even have access to a printer. You can, I'm going to have you write down key information from this and maybe modify your assignments next week. The fact that you're writing down this instead of being able to print it out will not affect you that much. So here's some like just generic ideas. So about like how societies and states rise, it's usually one of these. So obviously you have to read the documents, and if one of these applies and one of these applies, then maybe you're gonna make it the focus of your thesis statement. The adjective is important. It's an efficient bureaucracy, a powerful military, efficient tax collection, strong economy, etc. Maybe these can find their way into your essay. Now, I don't know what the documents are going to be, so I mean, don't just throw these in if it's asking about like the rise of the Mongol Empire. You're like, okay, I'm not going to read the documents first. I'm just going to throw these in. No, I mean, read the documents first and then see which one of these might apply. This is just something. These are kind of like a mental backup, right? Like if you're thinking of a blank, if you're running blank into, or your mind isn't all there, or you're panicking, these can help assuage your panics, right? And this can also make you more specific, right? About in your essay. Why societies and states declined. Here's some just general ideas. Generally in AP world history, it's because of outside invaders. There's civil war, some types of social chaos, maybe social unrest that is caused by either different ideologies or maybe social and economic inequities. Disease, epidemic disease. The bubonic plague features prominently in our discussions thus far in the course, especially considering the current pandemic. Epidemic disease can cause a lot of chaos as it has in the world today. Obviously, thankfully, it hasn't caused a lot of social unrest in the United States, but it's still there, right? And you can imagine diseases like the bubonic plague that kill 1/3 of the population in Europe, causing tremendous more political chaos. Succession problems. So this deals with, this would probably be more stuff that is later on, especially, but think of succession, or we covered more succession issues when we talked about totalitarian dictatorships and authoritarian systems, which persist throughout history, but or at least authoritarian systems do, but we focus more on that at like the Unit 7, Unit 8, Unit 9, which are no longer on the test. But they're the be a DBQ, which which alerts you to succession problems. So succession problems would be like, for instance, after Muhammad died, there was a dispute about who should be the rightful leader of the Islamic Caliphate, and this split the religion into two, Sunnis and Shias. So that's what we mean by succession problems, like who should succeed a leader, whether it be religious or political or both. Political corruption, that's self-explanatory, and competing religion / philosophies. How did religion spread? With trade, with merchants, religious ideas spread. Missionaries, people whose stated objective is to convert people. That's especially prominent in colonization and imperialism, European colonization and imperialism. Warfare, forced conversion. Maybe times of uncertainty / need for stability. Another point that is not also there, there's some religions that are more egalitarian, like Islam spread pretty rapidly because it was a more egalitarian faith, or at least perceived by a lot of people. There may be values associated with religions that kind of address needs of societies in which they enter in different ways. So that's how religion spread. Times of uncertainty / need for stability. Why do conflicts occur? So this should be my area of speciality. That's I majored in international politics, but I concentrated in security studies, which focuses on this question: why do conflicts occur, and how can we prevent it? So it's much more than just this, but these are the things that we see in AP World History: competition over resources, advancements in technology, maybe uncertainty could be one, or we talked about the security dilemma as well in class. So if you need a refresher on that, please message me or chat with me. State rivalries, ethnic divisions, those are some blanket ideas. Or bucket ideas, I should say. That's what I wanted. That was the word that I wanted. Sorry, it's very early in the morning for me. This is the section, how to address parts of the prompt more specifically. So the prompt may ask you about like social dimensions of or political, or it might reference to any one of these blanket terms. Like, what are the political effects of this, or the social effects? What are the political causes, the social causes? What stayed the same socially? It might use these terms. You might be tempted to reuse these terms in your thesis when you're answering the question, but really you have to become more specific. So when we're talking about social effects, we're talking about social hierarchies, gender relations, patriarchy / matriarchy. Patriarchy is where men dominate society. Matriarchy is where women dominate society. Gender issues, rights of women, differences between upper and lower classes or different types of classes. Slavery, levels of education, labor systems. That's what we mean by when the prompt refers to like social effects or social causes or social issues, or wants to talk about something social. Political, we're talking about key rulers, the bureaucracy, military, law codes, taxation. So if you're given that, asked to talk about political effects or political causes or something political, then you really want to talk about those areas, the ruler, the bureaucracy, military, law codes, taxation. And of course, there's more. Economics, to kind of narrow this broad topic, agriculture, trade, manufacturing, you have to be more specific. What labor system, is it slavery, encomienda, indentured servitude, maybe idea or systems of organizing society like feudalism, capitalism, or maybe ideas, economic ideas like mercantilism and Marxism. Culture has to deal with like ideologies, language, religion, philosophy, art, education, literature, nationalism, stuff like that. Migration and demography. Here, I just define it for you so you understand if that's in the prompt what they're asking for. So migration would be the movement of peoples, whether permanent or temporary, and demography, changes in population size and / density. Technology examples would be like the printing press, vaccines, the internet. If it asks you what are the effects of major technologies, or what major technologies existed in a particular time period, these would be some examples. Human environment interaction is self-explanatory. How do humans affect the environment, and how does the environment in turn affect humans? So I think you could find ways to talk about that in your essay by yourself. This is the section where I include major topics in EP world history, and under each topic there is either a fact or a description of an idea / ideology. So I'm not going to pretend to know what the document-based question is going to look like. I don't know. I have no clue what College Board has in store. It might be across different time periods. It might be a DBQ that encompasses all of units 1 through 6, or like the time frame, like focuses from the period 1200 to 1900. It might be more narrow. It might be very, very specific. I don't know. It's mainly meant to test your skill. But these are some of the big topics in these units. So this might not be helpful at all, right? So the DBQ might not be about any of these topics. So in this case, it might not be very helpful. But I included these topics, and I included just like one fact, or maybe even a description, or a piece of information. I included page numbers on the Princeton Review. So like if that fact or piece of information is not relevant to your prompt, like, so let's say you have a prompt about like the trans-Saharan trade route, right? And then it doesn't really discuss about like how the fact that trans-Saharan trade helps give rise to the Songhai and Mali empires. And it's kind of hard to like integrate that into the essay, then don't, right? Really worth it. Maybe you need to consult the Princeton Review page. But this is just like stuff that, like, on the off chance, maybe I get it exactly right. And let's say, for example, new imperialism is the prompt on the DBQ, right? So you would come down here. You would be able to access the Princeton Review pages. You could see what pages on the Princeton Review you could consult if you were really, really lost. I recommend not to consult the Princeton Review. You should just look at the documents first. Consult the Princeton Review only if you're super, super lost. But really just try to make an argument using the documents that they give you. And then maybe it is relevant. You could take this particular fact that there's the Council of Berlin, 1884. I'm going to put Council of Berlin, Berlin Conference. Forgot about that. It's a meeting at which the major European powers negotiated and carved up Africa. And maybe that's not in any of the documents, then that's something that you could throw into your essay as a specific and relevant piece of evidence. Remember, you have to have 2 outside pieces of evidence from the documents. You could throw it into your essay and then explain how it is relevant to your argument. So you need to do that. And then you can get 1 point right there really quickly. You could also, maybe there's no documents about King Leopold. You could talk about how King Leopold ran a brutal colony in the Congo with all kinds of abuses that become the subject of Heart of Darkness, which is a famous fiction book. That would be a cool piece of outside evidence, and that you can integrate into your essay, and you would get 2 points automatically, right? Now, you could also, one of these could also become, it just depends on like the context in which, or what the prompt is, right? So I would think something like this would be some good contextualization that you could put at the beginning of your essay. So countries that industrialized first, so you can talk about the Industrial Revolution as the context for new imperialism. Countries that industrialize kind of crave new markets and resources. You could talk about how the age of revolution, there's so many different things you could talk about in terms of context, but maybe some of these ideas would work, right? So this is just kind of me throwing a Hail Mary, giving you some of the major topics and maybe just a fact or a collection of facts under each topic that you could either use, throw in your essay as specific pieces of outside evidence, and then you have to do the explaining on how that relates to the argument you're making, or maybe you can throw this at the beginning before your thesis. Those are the only two places that any of this information would be relevant. And maybe this is not going to be helpful. So this is probably the least helpful section. I mean, I would say that this is a helpful section in terms of studying the different materials and like if you're lacking in one particular area before the DBQ, but like on DBQ day, most of this is stuff that you're not going to be able to use, right? And it could be true that none of this would be relevant. Here is where I put a DBQ rubric. It's 10 points. Go ahead and look at the DBQ rubric. I give you like basically how I taught it and what it needs to contain to get all the points. It's out of 10 points. I also give you a writing structure. I recommend, for example, that your contextualization, you try to make it as specific as possible, give a general sense of what's going on, you know, a key dates, maybe give a key event that happened before whatever the topic of the prompt is, or that is happening during the topic of the prompt that adds context to what's going on. And then this could be a good, you know, writing structure. I recommend that contextualization needs to be about 3 sentences. So maybe in key date, blank happened, this led to a significant, such is significant because, and then kind of explain. I also recommend that maybe it'd be really cool if you like explained an ideology, right? So insert major ideology. So maybe mercantilism is a major ideology that says, and then you insert the tenets of that ideology, and it was dominant in the blank, and then give like a kind of time frame and explain how it's critical to understanding what's going on in the topic of your prompt. That's a good way, good kind of rule of thumb for contextualization. You don't have to use these structures if they're limiting, especially if you're a kid that consistently scores, you know, 4s and 5s on unit exams, then, you know, you don't have to use these structures. I think I trust you enough to be able to use your own, but if you need extra help, if you're missing the contextualization point, and if I keep giving feedback on your DBQs that you're missing it, then these are structures that you need to adopt. A thesis looks different for each essay. If you're really lost, maybe you can use one of these structures. Maybe some of them might not be, right? So you might have a continuity and change essay, and this essay or this kind of thesis structure really doesn't help, but it could, right? So I would definitely go and look through these. Some of these might help. This is kind of like a causation essay with a kind of that shows that in causation essays, when you're talking about like causes of an event, you really kind of want to make it explicit. This should also say both. You really kind of want to make it explicit that there's, you know, one cause is more important than the other, or give like a sense of hierarchy between causes. Continuity and change here, and then your comparison essay. These are kind of like essay or a thesis structure that you can look at. These are not very complicated thesis structures. I expect you to try to make your thesis a little bit more complicated, try to make it 2 sentences, and then make sure that from your thesis, you take elements of your thesis and put it into topic sentences. This is the body paragraph pattern that I gave. It's a little bit more structured than the writing structure that I gave you in class because I wanted to provide you with more sentence stems or like stuff that you can use to, if you're really, really lost, to kind of help. And then the blank is where you formulate your ideas and stuff like that. Because I know sometimes a lot of us get caught up in the writing of it, and that's really not as important on these tests as maybe the content. I think teaching writing for me has been very fulfilling, and I'm very proud to be able to teach writing to you guys and to do what I think is best practices and try to teach writing for college. And I am never going to stop doing that and never going to stop encouraging it because I think I want to encourage you guys to think. But if you're struggling and you're lost on test day, these are maybe some good go-tos, especially if you haven't been scoring. If you've been scoring consistently a 1 on the DBQs that we've been getting, if a lot of your feedback is centered around, okay, I'm kind of a little lost in your essay, then I'm going to push you to adopt these writing structures. This is words that you can use to stitch your essay together. So really look through these. Maybe on test day, you're going to be a little lost. Everyone is going to use these, or not necessarily these words, but you're going to have to summarize documents, right? That's the basic, skill that we learned, the most basic skill we learned in class, how to summarize documents. And so maybe you're lost and you're worried about the technicalities of writing and the style of writing. I would say don't, right? Just get to the point as fast as possible. But if you're really worried, maybe you can use one of these. Describe the document in brief. So in brief, document 2 is about. These are words you can use for summarizing. These are words that you can use for adding. Talking about another document. Additionally, document blank is about besides, first, second, whatever. Linking documents together, you can talk about it by using words like as alluded to in document 2. Document 1 also suggests this. In parallel, as noted above, those are some words that you can use. So I would say that everyone has to do all of these like skills, summarizing and linking, and these are some words that you can use. This is more recommended. You can use in your essay. For cause and effect, like if you want to explain how something caused another thing, you could say due to, in consequence, as a result of, prompted by, or just simply this caused this. Compare and contrast. These are more like it depends on what kind of essay type you're given, whether it's a cause and effect essay or compare and contrast essay or a continuity and change essay. Compare and contrast would be something as well as compared to, in contrast, in much the same way, on the other hand, similarly. These 2 boxes are for kids that want the complexity point. So if you're going for that complexity point, then you want to integrate as much historical analogies as possible. An alternative route is to be, well, not necessarily an alternative route. I would say and recommend that you just do this either way, because it's good college level writing is to like integrate counter arguments. And when you're countering counter arguments, you might use this language. However, in contrast, on the contrary, even if we grant that, but if you're qualifying, so qualifying means making something more nuanced, less black and white, you might use language like conceding that despite, in spite of. The important thing to note is writing really isn't, I can give you a lot of writing structures, and I think how you guys have learned writing has been a little bit disappointing from an outsider's point of view, because a lot of you are really like plug in the blank writing structures. And I think that's really limiting your potential in college. I know a lot of us depend upon this for some help, and I want you to consult this and to use it, but my writing structures are not necessarily, they leave a lot of room for your creativity to shine through, for your intellect to shine through. And I think that's harder to teach. But what I wanted to get at there, I guess, is that none of these words are something that you could just use and then plug in whatever information you want, and then you're like, oh, I created a cause and effect sentence, so to speak, right? It's important to note that you have to supply ideas that are appropriate with that. So for example, just saying however does not produce a complication of preceding ideas. It merely indicates that such a complication is forthcoming. So you have to do that extra work and extra lifting. Okay, so that was the golden ticket. That was a lot lengthier than I thought. I'm going to create a YouTube video on the golden ticket and explaining assignments that we're going to have due with the golden ticket next week. Here's an example document-based question. This DBQ that you guys have written is something that I had written before. Motives for colonization. I'm going to rewrite it only because when I first wrote it, I wanted you guys to use all the letters of SOAP because I knew that eventually we would get to the point where I came with a big reveal and said that only one letter of SOAP is really all that you need to source a document. But I wanted you to use all the letters of SOAP so that way you thought of documents and all those different dynamics and approached it, looking at all the different elements of SOAP. And then that way it would be easier when you found out that you only really need one element of SOAP. So when I first wrote it, I used all the elements of SOAP. You could see in green, I talk about the speaker and like the nuances of this, or like the background of the speaker and how that might impact, their perspective. We did, that kind of writing where we integrated all the elements of SOAP into like 2 sentences. Well, now you only really need one element of SOAP, but it has to be good. I would recommend sticking with 2 elements of SOAP. Sometimes they bleed into each other. So I'm going to make it less. I'm going to make this DBQ look more natural, right? So when we were writing like this, it was really kind of unnatural. We were very determined to find all the elements of SOAP. So I'm going to rewrite this DBQ here in the allotted time. I'm going to go a little faster because I don't want to make this YouTube video really, really lengthy. So here it is. And then we're going to start soon. One thing before we start, and I just forgot. Oh, no. Okay, good. I wanted to show you my Teams page because I'm so amazing and I've been putting a lot of work into it. So for the complexity point section in the Teams page, I started to put like some content here. So go check these out. I'm starting to populate this with more content. I haven't turned back your DBQ like I promised I was going to do that. The one that you turned in last Friday, I was going to turn it back. But to be honest, I have been like you guys in some ways, and my sleeping schedule has been off. And so I crashed because I was just exhausted. So I'm going to work on getting you that feedback today. But go ahead and look at these. I just wanted to go to the College Ready channel to just like do stuff that is really kind of a waste of time too, in some sense, because it's not relevant to the AP. But I still want to be a good teacher, like, and not just teach towards the test, But there's some like really cool events that I saw. I know a lot of you have been like fascinated by like Kim Jong-un. There's this really cool event at like a think tank where she talks about like, she's a former analyst at the CIA, and she talks about Kim Jong-un. If that's too boring for you, I'll include, there's a 5-minute New York Times video that talks about how analysts analyze what's going on in North Korea. I know a lot of you are really fascinated by the subject. Like every time we talk about North Korea, you guys go on forever and ever. So I think that's really cool. Another thing I will say, there's like these cool writing center resources that I'm publishing from like elite universities. Partly because I'm a little pretentious, but also partly because elite universities kind of make really cool resources and good resources. And so that's where I got all these like stitching words from. This one's from the Yale Writing Center. So go check out the College Ready channel. It's really cool. Well, in my mind, it's cool. So I also had a conversation with Ms. Garcia about the books Heart of Darkness and Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. So go check this out. This is honestly me just trying to be a teacher that is more than someone that is just teaching towards the test. And I think all teachers should aspire to do that. Controversial opinion. How nations make up national identities. We talked about nationalism as an imagined community. This is a cool book talk that is actually very relevant. This is a cool video from Harvard University that talks about the value of the humanities and how it can provide, even people that are more STEM focused with, valuable tools to engage other people and to think intellectually about the world. Yeah, so please check out this channel. Yeah, I think I talked about all these other channels. I also just didn't want to start on the essay because I am so tired. Oh my God, I don't think I'm gonna write this. Okay, I think I need more coffee. That's what I need. Okay. Ooh. Let's get this done. Okay. So this is the annotated version of the document-based question that I gave you guys a long time ago. So I provided annotations with it, and there's actually a YouTube video of me breaking down the writing process for this document-based question. I think this was one of the early YouTube videos where I focus more on like writing essays. So I'm going to remake it because I think it was poorly produced YouTube video. The content was not great, and Microsoft Teams is like a really cool resource. So the prompt, I'm just going to rewrite it here because I'm also making the golden ticket at the same time because Miss Jones wants this golden ticket. She wants to check it out. So this actually essay is going to be with you. It's going to be a part of your golden ticket because I'm going to annotate parts of it and explain or show you. It's kind of going to be like a model of what a response to a document-based question would look like. This is a causation essay, and the reason why I chose this is because it's kind of like causation because it's talking about the motives for colonization, but it's also kind of like a comparison essay. So it covers like two historical thinking skills because you have to compare colonization, European colonization in the 16th century with European colonization in the 19th century. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at the documents. I had already annotated this document for you, so I'm not going to go ahead and read these. I would provide, as I'm looking at different as you're going through these documents, I want you to like write down notes, write down summaries or like key information from the documents. I recommend writing down summaries first. So I've already done this like in written form in the scanned document-based question, so I'm not going to do it again. But document 1 talks about the vices of the Indians and explains the process of indoctrinating Indians. Document 2 shows Columbus literally bringing religion to the natives. So you see in document 2, remember summaries are just like, what is the main idea of the document? You're just explaining it. So you can see him bringing a cross to the natives, and you can see a cross in the background. Document 3 lists the economic benefits of settling in Massachusetts. Document 4, Cecil Rhodes claims that the English are the finest race in the world and should colonize. So this one I'm going to focus on. This is more new imperialism, and that's the other thing I wanted to focus on. These are more old imperialism. This is 16th century imperialism usually. Yeah, and then the later documents are new imperialism, which are the 19th century. So those are the documents that we have to compare. In document 4, Cecil Rhodes, who's a British businessman in South Africa, so he writes, I contend that we are the finest race in the world, and that the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race. Just fancy those parts that are at present inhabited by the most despicable specimens of human beings. What an alteration there would be if they were brought under Anglo-Saxon influence. Look again at the extra employment a new country added to our dominions gives. I contend that every acre added to our territory means in the future birth to some more of the English race who otherwise would not be brought into existence. Africa is still lying ready for us. It is our duty to take it. It is our duty to seize every opportunity of acquiring more territory, and we should keep this one idea steadily before our eyes. And more territory simply means more of the Anglo-Saxon race, more of the best, the most human, most honorable race the world possesses. So in document 4, Cecil Rhodes claims that English are the finest race in the world, right? It's pretty obvious. He's also saying that the English should colonize Africa because they're a superior race. He's kind of alluding to the white man's burden, la mission civilisatrice that we talked about, that was really one of the principal motives of European imperialism, the age of new imperialism, in your Unit 6 review video. I'm going to source this document. Document 5, Jules Ferry. He's a prime minister of France from a speech before the French Chamber of Deputies in 1884. So he says, I repeat that the superior races have a right because they have a duty, la mission civilisatrice. They have the duty to civilize the inferior races. In the history of earlier centuries, these duties, gentlemen, have often been misunderstood. And certainly when the Spanish soldiers and explorers introduced slavery into Central America, they did not fulfill their duty as men of a higher race. But in our time, I maintain that European nations acquit themselves with generosity, with grandeur, and with sincerity of a superior civilizing duty. I say that French colonial policy, the policy of colonial expansion, the policy that has taken us under the empire, the Second Empire, whatever. So Jules Ferry claims the French have a duty to colonize other parts of the world. That's the summary that I come up with. He's the prime minister of France. He has like this famous debate with Clemenceau. I think I've talked about this before, but Ferry and Clemenceau have this famous back and forth about colonization. Clemenceau is against it. George Washington Williams, he's an African-American politician, lawyer, and journalist. He is actually really fascinating. So in the lecture by Adam Hochschild that I shared with you guys that I think I'm going to make mandatory eventually, he talks about how George Washington Williams, he was meets with King Leopold, and is actually very enthralled with what King Leopold is saying about the Congo. He believes that King Leopold is on a humanitarian mission. When he actually visits the Congo, he finds out that the Africans there are basically forced into a type of slavery. Remember, slavery had been abolished prior to this, so it's not really slavery, but like they get very meager pay for what they're doing. There's forced labor in some sense. People's hands are being chopped off because they're not meeting quotas. It's a very horrible, abusive colonial system in the Congo that exists. So he's kind of critical. So he kind of notes the brutality of Belgian colonizers. He's writing an open letter to King Leopold. Your Majesty's government has sequestered their land, burned their towns, stolen their property, enslaved their women and children, and committed other crimes too numerous to mention in detail. It is natural that they everywhere shrink from the fostering care your Majesty's government so eagerly proffers them. So he even goes to the point of saying, like, yeah, it's a new form of slavery, which it was, right? They enslaved women and children. They were government is cruel and arbitrary. So he's very critical of that. So I'm also going to source this document. John A. Hobson, he's an English economist, and this is an excerpt from Imperialism. So John Hobson notes that English So he's basically saying English imperialism is driven by economic needs, right? The economic needs being the search for markets. So in this essay, similar to the previous essay that you wrote about motives or about European exploration, I'm going to go ahead and form the argument. You can come up with a different argument that European colonization, the motives for European colonization in the 16th and 19th century are very similar, because that's mainly what I'm doing. I'm comparing the two. I'm going to say the motives were chiefly economic. Both were searching for economic resources to exploit. So that's going to be my central argument, but I'm also going to say too, both kind of had like almost a mission civilistrice, and the new imperialism was a desire to civilize. In old imperialism, you could see the documents talk more about like converting people. Conversion is also very popular in new imperialism, but it's not prominent in the documents. I'm also going to talk about, yeah, those two motives in principally. Yeah. So for contextualization in this is such a special DBQ. I really like it. But contextualization in this, I would be more, you could do contextualization that is sandwiched in between these two timeframes, because it kind of contextualizes like what are the major events that happened in between the 16th and 19th century colonization. So contextualization could look like you could talk about the age of revolutions, and then you could therefore talk about how like basically all of the Americas becomes freed up in the age of revolutions. And so when European powers industrialize, they can't really go back, or they don't necessarily have markets and resources that they can exploit from the Americas. So they have to find new places that they can exploit. You know, Africa and Asia are those places. Simple, but super, super important. You could also just go into like detail and length about what else? What else could you do? I don't know. Sorry, no, sorry. I just had kind of like one of those moments where you know that your brain goes dead because I'm so tired. But you could also talk about maybe like the Industrial Revolution as contextualization, and like the search for new markets and resources as being central to, or as like being a cause of the Industrial Revolution and therefore new imperialism. Yeah. You can also go with the 1492 example again, talk about Christopher Columbus sailing the ocean blue. There's so many different things you could talk about. You could talk about mercantilism as being prominent in the 16th century. There's so many different directions you can go with talking about and comparing these two. So you can talk about an event that happens before the 16th century, because we're comparing, remember, 16th and 19th century imperialism, or you can talk about an event that takes place in between 16th and 19th century imperialism. That's the direction I'm going to go to contextualize. So I'm going to say the age of revolutions that took place. This is going to be my contextualization. Remember that I am kind of using this, but I'm not going to use it to limit me, right? Because I'm just trying to show you my thinking process. The age of revolutions that took place in the 18th and early kicked out Europe from, let's use expelled. Let's get our ACT on. Expelled Europe from the Americas. After the Industrial Revolution takes place around 1750, which takes place in the mid 18th century in Britain and spreads to Europe and the US. Also spreads to Japan, but I noticed that in the documents it doesn't really talk about imperialism in Asia. After the Industrial Revolution, which takes place in the mid 18th century in Britain and spread to Europe and the US. So this is again a type of contextualization where I'm leading with a specific event or sort of specific event and giving a date, right? So this is as recommended by here. You can give like a definitive date. If you're talking about like a revolution, maybe a definitive date is not appropriate, but give kind of some sense of the time period. European countries were hungry, needed markets, resources, and markets to exploit. So I could use the word exploit to get more almost political or more at how horrible colonialism and imperialism was. But you could also say to feed their factories, you can get more metaphorical. It's up to you. New imperialism in the 19th century was thus born. Okay, now I'm going to get into my thesis. And remember, I'm just going to check the time on this to make sure I'm not going way overboard. Oh, we got 44 minutes already. Now I'm going to get into the thesis. And remember, a thesis statement, the example thesis statements that I gave you here, it's kind of almost like a causation and a comparison essay. It's a blended. So none of these structures really kind of fit. Maybe this one kind of does because I kind of give a sense of like, I'm kind of want to give a sense that economic motives are central to both 16th and 19th century imperialism. It's a blended essay, so maybe it requires a different structure. So I'm going to go with something else. So I'm going to say something along the lines of both, because it's a comparison essay, the 16th first. It's a comparison essay first, but it's really talking about motives, so it's also causation. Both the 16th and 19th century European colonization was driven principally by economic search for resources and markets. Both the 16th and 19th century European colonization was 16th and 19th century, right? But there's more because this is a one-sentence thesis that's very descriptive, it's very good. But if my thesis is going to project all that I'm going to talk about, I really need to talk about the other motives for imperialism that I see. '16th and 19th century colonization also I can talk about desires to convert natives the drive to convert colonized peoples to motive to convert colonized peoples to Christianity and to civilize was also present in both forms of colonization, suggesting so 16. I also kind of want to make it a little bit more complicated. From the documents, even though I don't really necessarily agree with this position, but from the documents, it seems like conversion seems like a more important drive in the 16th century than in the 19th century. So I might make that statement. The motive to colonize peoples to Christianity and civilize was also present in both forms of colonization. Yeah, this thesis, I really don't like it. I want to reform it. I just don't know how. Both 16th and 19th century European colonization were extremely similar. Both were driven Yeah, I think that's a good essay. That's a good thesis. I think in the essay, though, I'm gonna like try to make the point that conversion seems from the documents, and I think the documents are kind of like whoever wrote this skills book is necessarily limited by the documents available. I think they're probably not the best historian in the world. They're an amateur historian because I think it was teachers that wrote the skills book. But conversion does seem from the documents to be more important in the 16th and 19th century. But also I know that conversion was also, missionaries were also very prevalent in the 19th century imperialism as well. I also don't like how the documents don't really kind of only focus on like American colonization or Spanish colonization specifically in the Americas, and then European colonization in Africa. And it doesn't really integrate like Asia or European imperialism in Asia and China, etc. That's going to be the thesis. Long story short. And then my topic sentence was going to be European colonization in the 16th and 19th centuries, because remember I derived my topic sentence from there, were driven by economic, the search for resources and markets. And markets to export were driven principally. Okay. Then we're going to find all the documents that talk about economics. Oh, sorry, it's wrong. To look at. Document 3, for instance, lists the economic benefits of settling in Massachusetts. In document 4, John Hobson in English European imperialism was driven by you could put, let's use some of the stitching words. Ooh, fancy. Let's see for linking. Maybe we just put similarly in document 4, John Hobson's study was driven by manufacturers could supply. So it basically means it needed a place to sell their goods. So that's document 7. So I have 2 documents down. Remember, your DBQ is only going to be 5 documents, but I'm going to try to do all 7 of these documents in as little time as I want. The rest not to be about economics, right? It's only document 3. Those are the ones I'm citing. And then, actually, this is harder for me to do because I'm arguing that it's a central part of my essay. So I need to go ahead and source some documents to take them down, so to speak. And so I'm going to put this one because I know that Cecil Rhodes is a businessman. And so he's a British man in South Africa from the Confessions of Faith. And so I'm going to source him because I think his perspective, although it means that as a British businessman, he wants an interest in, he has an economic interest in colonization, right? The colonialism are that you get like a forced labor system, you get resources, you know, a lot of African resources are exploited by colonial powers in the era of new imperialism. And this is when this takes place. Oh no, it better. And so that's when this is taking place in the era of new imperialism, 1877. Cecil Rhodes actually, by the way, starts the Rhodes Scholarship. So I would go ahead and put, I would wager that his saying that, oh, the English need to colonize, they need to civilize, is also driven by, you know, economic interests and motives that he want to admit. I'm going to put the summary of the document, which is in document, but I'm also going to try to add our stitching language. Although in document 4, Cecil Rhodes claimed the English are the finest should colonize and civilize inferior races out of duty. Is likely hiding, trying to hide the true motives of European colonialism. Cecil Rhodes, and this is where I put, was a prominent British businessman in South Africa that had an economic interest in exploiting the So this, I just get at like the fact that he's a British businessman kind of diminishes what he's trying to say, which is like, well, what Cecil Rhodes is saying is that colonialism and imperialism is all about converting the savages. So I'm saying, no, it's not. Like, he's a British businessman. He's probably just trying. To obfuscate that. Why is it? So here I'm getting at both letters of SOAP. It's more amorphous. SOAP in practice when you're writing in real knowledge. I guess that's what I'm doing. But you know, it's kind of both an element of speaker and an element of purpose, right? The speaker is a British businessman. Maybe he has an interest, an economic motive that he wants to hide, and the purpose of his diet. But I'm also going to say the desire to convert natives to Christianity and the civilizing mission were both important. And I'll explain the civilizing mission later. Features in European colonialism. Were important features in European colonization in the 16th and 19th centuries. Granted, and this is where I'm going to continue my topic sentence, the desire to convert I'm going to issue a disclaimer here and put seems more prominent in 16th century European colonization and the 16th century. based on these documents. This would not exist there, but I think the AP test writers would probably have a better DBQ. Central to 16th century European colonization and the desire to civilize more central to 19th century colonization. But that's a small distinction, because it really kind of is converting someone to a better religion and civilizing someone, kind of one and the same. And in fact, there are all types of missionaries that take place in new imperialism that for some reason just don't appear in this document set. So that's kind of like my difference between the two. So now I'm just going to come into citing the documents in document 1. A Spaniard talks about the vices of the Indians and explains the process of indoctrinating Spanish indoctrinating Indians. Obviously, you know, he's biased, but maybe I just don't want to waste time sourcing him. Document shows Columbus literally bringing religion to the natives. Based on my topic sentence, it's clear how these documents connect to the topic sentence, but my push would be like, I think I want you to write like maybe an extra sentence explaining how it connects to the topic sentence, because I have bad network connection, as you can see in the right corner, and I want to get DBQ over with. In document 1, I spent about the vices of the Indians, explains the process of indoctrinating Indians. Okay. The Spanish priest is enumerating the vices of the Indians in order to justify forcibly converting them. And laying a foundation for Spanish subjugation of indigenous Americans. So this is where I source it, and I focus pretty on purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and source this one. Remember, you only have to source 2 documents, but I say source 3. So source 3, because if this one kind of sucks, and if you get the purpose or the sourcing wrong, then it doesn't count. So document 2, so source 3. Document 2 shows Columbus literally bringing religion to the natives. I'm not going to source that one. I'm just going to maybe add another, showing the importance of I'm just going to put suggesting the importance of conversion to 16th century colonization. Then I'm going to go ahead and cite document 5. And document 5, Jules Ferry, the Prime Minister of France, claims that the French have a duty to colonize other parts of the world. This is where I plan on integrating the outside information, but first I'm going to source it. So maybe 1 or 2 sentences, and then I'm going to integrate outside, those points you get separately. You have to do, you can't, like, if your sourcing includes describing the historical contents, which is the occasion and so, then you need to also, you can't just say, okay, that covers both, right? Because no, it doesn't. The document 5 joules, but you can put it in like the same area. Actually, wait, does it cover both? Let me get back to you on that. I need to check the rubric. It should cover both, but like, honestly, I think your sourcing should focus more on like the speaker and the purpose. And I think if you might get more confused if you go with the mindset that if I source it, and then it'll cover both. So like, just think of them as conceptually forever. Document 5, Jules Ferry, the Prime Minister of France, claims the French have a duty to colonize other parts of the world. He is, I'm going to talk about him as a speaker and the purpose. As the Prime Minister of France, however, he is clearly trying to justify European subjugation of African people. La mission civilisatrice, the white man's burden, was a common, and then motive civilisatrice and the white man's burden was a motive cited by colonizers for colonization, but was used simply saying it was all about economic motives would be, because saying it was all about economic motives would not fly. It's simple. Let's see. Document 6, document 7.
Is this a body paragraph?
Oh, what up, Medea? No, this is I'm writing the DBQ. So I made a golden ticket for you guys. So this was your golden ticket. So that's why the video explained the golden ticket.
Mm.
This was the one Miss Jones wanted me to make for you guys.
I'm gonna write like that. I'm gonna use it.
Yeah, this one's actually pretty good because it provides, this is like me. It does provide some writing structure, but not as much as I think some of admin would have wanted me to put. But I think that's better because I want to force you guys to think. And then it provides like different words you can use to stitch your essay together. This is from like just a handout at the Yale Writing Center.
I saw that. That was epic. I always look up transition words and stuff like that. So
yeah, and I think this is good too. But like this would be stuff like everybody needs skills. And depending what type of essay you write, you might need to use these transition words.
No. I think everyone needs it. I know I'll definitely be using it. You just froze.